Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Talk Junkies, where tonight's going to be a very fun and interesting night. It's been a few weeks since we've had this guest on. It's always a pleasure to bring this guest on to our show. This show. Tonight we are missing Jesse. He did have kind of a family issue going on, and maybe he'd like to discuss that next week whenever he joins Talk Junkies. So he'll be back next Sunday. I want to give a big shout out to Andrew Holacek, who came on the show last week. We talked about lucid dreaming. It's very fascinating, very interesting stuff, man. I really do encourage people to buy his book, the Lucid Dreaming Workbook. It's very, very interesting stuff. I've been reading his book and trying to practice to get to lucid dreaming, and I'm getting one step closer each time I read his book, man. So, again, big shout out to you, Andrew. Thanks for coming on Talk Junkies. But anyways, tonight, no better person to bring on during the crazy times that we live in when it pertains to our freedoms, our right to bear arms, our right to freedom of anything. And that is the Constitution. And Dan, what is going on, my man?
Having a good time, having a good week. And you know what? I wish you told me that you had this lucid dreaming guy on.
Yeah?
Yeah, because lucid dreaming is something I haven't done it in a while, but that was something that my grandfather introduced me to when I was a kid. Because I used to have nightmares of monsters chasing me, and I'd wake up screaming.
Yeah.
And he sat me down one night and talked to me and said, you know, you can change that anytime you want. Whenever you're in your dream and the monsters are chasing you, all you have to do is stop and turn around and tell them to go away.
And that's what you did?
Yep. And it worked. And off of that, I spun into the being able to get in there and actually control my dreams. And like I said, I haven't done it in a while. You know, it takes, you got to decide that's what you're going to do pretty much before you go to sleep. But
yeah,
you know,
yeah, no,
really cool.
I'm sorry, man. Yeah, but it was fascinating stuff. And again, I think that a lot of people don't know about it. And just looking on YouTube and searching for lucid dreams, like the view counts aren't up there on any of the big videos, TED Talks, stuff like that. They're not in the millions. So I don't think it's something that's really pushed in America. And that makes me wonder why. But anyways, we're going to get into some fascinating topics tonight. Briefly, you and I discussed, and again, I want to thank you for coming on such short notice. Maybe what does it mean to be on the left side right now? And maybe when I mean left, maybe like far left. Because some people would suggest that if you're just left, you're still kind of on the right side or in the middle. So what does it mean to be a radical left in today's political arena?
Well, I think one of the things that's important to understand about when you start talking about left and right dynamics is that with politics you're always talking about government. And so if we start talking about politics and we start talking about government, your left and right is a spectrum, right? And and on a spectrum you're going from one extreme to another. You're measuring basically one what would you call it? One characteristic moving back and forth on that spectrum. And when we're talking about government, the thing that we actually have to really look at is what is the one feature of government that you could actually put on a spectrum like that to measure, and that would be like authority, power. You know, what the degree to which you have government, right? And for one side, and generally I say that's on the right, for one side you have zero government or anarchy, and on the other side you have total government, which is authoritarian, right? And that's on the left. Now, most people like to get into a conversation about left and right and talk about their feelings or agendas and things like that, and it's fine to talk about that and try and say that you lean left or right, but it really only applies if you're talking about the degree of government authority, right? So when you talk about, for instance, fascism or Nazism, and you start talking about that as being right wing, it's not. Fascism and Nazism are authoritarian forms of government. They're on the left. They're left wing, radical left wing. All of those things, communism, Marxism, communism, fascism, socialism, Nazism, those are all Marxist ideologies. They're all left wing. And the idea of splitting those ideologies apart came after World War II, when the communists decided that they needed to distance themselves from these people who had taken Marxism and turned it into, turned the basic economic ideas in Marxism to a national, and whittled it down into a nationalistic kind of thing. That's the basic difference between communism and socialism, which want to establish an international dictatorship of the proletariat, and Nazism and fascism, which want to establish that Marxist framework within a nationalistic or racial ideology within a particular country. But both of those ideologies are left wing. Both of those ideologies are authoritarian. It's a centralized system where everything happens at the top and it's dictated straight down to everybody else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. But so my question to that would be, so what would a radical left say to that? Would they say that, no, you're inaccurate and that's not what we represent? Or would they be like, no, you know what, you're right, like that kind of is how it is, what it is, and that's what we want?
No, they are absolutely opposed to that. They're opposed to that viewpoint because in their minds, the communists and socialists are polar opposites of the Nazis and the fascists. But here's the interesting thing: is that when you ask them to identify how the two of them are different, the only thing that they can ever come up with is nationalism and racial identity. That's it. The ownership of corporations, or the ownership of the business, or the ownership of private property, and on down the line, everything that Marx talks about, and the communists and the socialists are all in favor of, is exactly the same thing that the fascists and the Nazis talk about.
So maybe that might be the case. And again, I'm just prying. You see a lot of things happening right now with the last bill that was passed for the coronavirus relief package. Then we all received our $1,400 checks. Within that legislation, I believe it was I forget how much money it was. It was a lot of money, like 38 million or maybe 3 billion, or somewhere. A lot of money was allocated to people who are, like Indians or people are the black community. If they want to get involved in agriculture or farming, that money would be allocated to them. You see a lot of people now. You see there was a story where a couple senators are going to reject the next oncoming senators if they're not a person of color. I could have gotten that wrong, but I'm just saying you're seeing a lot of these things start to happen where they're trying to push, I don't know how to word this, where they're trying to push people of color into positions because maybe they think that, the white man is bad or whatever. That's kind of what I get from it. If you listen to CNN, that's what they say. Is that maybe a way of them, damn, I can't talk tonight. Is that maybe an answer that they would come up with and say, hey, this is how socialism is going to work, and it does work. We're going to start implementing affirmative action or equal opportunity for people of all colors, and we're going to demand that there's a certain amount of people who are this color, this color, this color, who are going to run these corporations in the government. Sorry, that took forever.
Well, that's one of the things that they try and say is that fascism and Nazism are racially exclusive, and socialism and communism are racially inclusive. In other words, they try and bring up these minority populations. But what they're doing is they're using those minority populations in order to gain control, right? Because it's not under a capitalist system or under our constitutional system. We really have a situation where it's a meritocracy. If you're good at what you do, then you succeed to the point that you would like to succeed. Basically, the merits, your abilities are what dictates how well you do.
So, and I got a question for that. I would agree with you 100% on that. I think in America, if you are good at what you do, no matter what color you are on your skin or what type of disability that you have or what it may be, if you're good at something, you're going to succeed. And America allows that for the most part right now. In what we live in, and I've talked plenty about the Constitution and how it's slowly slipping away, but I think that aspect of America still holds true. May that be slipping away as well? Possibility, but for right now, if this podcast were to continue to succeed, it would succeed because I tried my hardest and I worked my hardest, and it doesn't matter if I was black, white, Mexican, or Asian, like that would just happen. And damn it, I had a good train of thought, man. I'm just not. My mind is just going crazy tonight. So that part is still working, but there are still racist people that live out here in the United States, and it goes both ways. I was recently out in California, and a relative of mine works out in California, really big contractor for some really nice condos and stuff like that. And this individual this individual is black and trying to succeed in California and be this great person and build all these really great condos and does a really good job and has a good name. And there was an instance where, called this person who had money. Hey, this is what I've done. I'm going to build you this condo. And this guy's like, yeah, man, that sounds good. I've heard your work's really good. Guy knocks on the door. Hey, I'm here. Let's talk about building this condo. Sees the color of his skin and says, hey, man, sorry, he's not here right now. So like that type of stuff still exists. And that's what, you know what I'm saying? Like that's, I think, I don't know how to explain that. I think that it was slowly going away until just recently where I feel like the left is bringing racism back into the equation and making it more infuriating for everyone. But I mean, I'm not saying that happened this year. This probably happened a couple of years ago. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, that type of stuff, racism still does exist. And when it comes to bettering himself and becoming bigger in that type of environment, it's all white man. You know what I'm saying? It's all white men. And from what I could gather from having conversations with this individual, it's going to be tough to succeed in that type of environment.
In a racist type environment, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take a step back from that situation and you really look at it, who's the one who lost out in that? The guy who's the racist is the one who lost out in it because somebody who's well qualified to do that job, he turned him down based on an arbitrary, something that's completely arbitrary and means absolutely nothing to the talent and quality of work that this person does. Right? So He just shot himself in the foot by denying that or saying he's not going to work with this guy because of the color of his skin. He's the one that's causing himself the problem. And I think the more that we talk about racism and I can't remember who it was who said this, but I remember hearing somebody who was saying, we just ought to stop talking about it.
Yes, yeah.
It really isn't. It really, for 99% of the people here in America, now the rest of the world is a completely different story, but here in America, for 99% of the people, it's not even an issue. And if we stop talking about it, the next thing you know, the people who are really racist, we don't even have to do anything to push them out of the equation. Because we've chosen not to make it a conversation, they've got nothing to say. They've got no one to talk to.
For sure. I mean, the media will publicize it, and again, they turned it around to where it's very prevalent in today's society. But I'm just saying, like, people, and I'm not just saying just the African American community, but it could be any type of person who deals with some type of racism in their life. But just in that moment, those moments are going to exist for people who are trying to succeed. You know what I'm saying? Whether or not we talk about it or not. And that would just be frustrating in life. And I think you might be right in the fact that as more time goes by that we don't talk about it, it won't really exist anymore. And then those situations won't really happen. And if they do, they'll be really minimal as opposed to more occurrences of those things happening.
And one of the tools that we can use to make that go away too is to pay attention to what America is and who is an American, right? The Constitution of the United States is America, right? Without it, America doesn't exist. And Americans are those people who believe in, support, and want to live by the Constitution, right? That automatically excludes people who are racist. That automatically excludes communists, socialists, Nazis, and fascists. They're all out, right? We don't have a place for them here, and we don't have to figure out a way to make America okay for them. We just need to tell them to go away because we don't need them, right? Because here in America, when we start talking about what has made this country great, you can't point to a skin color, right? Because there are as many people who are despicable human beings. You know, there's a percentage of them that it doesn't matter what race you delve into, you're going to find pretty much that same percentage, right? Of just people who are despicable human beings, people that you just don't want to be around. And it doesn't matter, like I said, it doesn't matter what their skin color is because every population has them. But America is uniquely suited to where we could just get rid of them. We don't have to have them.
A lot of those people are the corporations, though, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah. And here's the thing is that the corporations are not American either. I mean, and that's
Very
something
true.
else that we need to address because these corporations, even if we go back to their beginnings, right? As soon as they became corporations, they became anti-American, right? Because our American system is based on the individual and the freedom of the individual to enter and leave the market at will. That's true capitalism. Is you know that there's no restriction on me entering and leaving the market with my products and services at will. When you start introducing corporations in there, now all of a sudden you've got the corporation, the way that it has come to be evolved is something that is a leftover from the European monarchies when they would come in and they would say, okay, you have your stockholders, you have all of these people from this mercantile system, and we're going to license you the ability to do this particular kind of business. Like the what was it called? The East India Tea Company or something like that. I can't remember the exact name of it. I think that's what it was called, the East India Tea Company. That was this huge corporation that was licensed by and endorsed by the crown. And they had their own navy. They had their own army. This was a huge corporation. And we've got things like that going on now, but these corporations have zero ability to survive in the American economy without the full support and endorsement of the government. When they have to come in and actually compete, right, without any protections, I mean, YouTube would be devastated, will be devastated when the United States government starts taking away the protections that have allowed them to take such a big chunk of the market.
Right.
Right? Because there's restrictions that are placed. They can restrict how you can share your content. Right? You don't get a choice about that.
Mm-mm.
You get a link that you can share, but you can't actually you upload that video to YouTube. I can't download that video. Right? If you wanted to make it so that people could just download the video and share it anywhere they wanted, you can't do that.
So would you consider big corporations and big tech like radical left, or are they like on a separate spectrum on the political scale? Are they more like dictatorship? Because there was that video from Project Veritas with James O'Keefe. There was that insider who had talked to a high-level executive from Facebook, and this person was clearly on tape, and it was legitimate. And he had said that no one in the history of the world has had control over 2 billion people, and Mark Zuckerberg does. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And he said in the video that it should be broken up. It's too big, and something needs to happen. But my question is, and we kind of did stray away a little bit, what does it mean to be left or a radical left? Are these corporations far left, or are they on their own spectrum?
Well, they are linked up with the government. Their power comes from manipulation of the government, right? So we've got the FCC.
Aren't they above the government, though? Because whenever Facebook and Twitter shut down Donald Trump, that just showed the amount of power that they have to shut down a president.
They've got that power because the government gives them protections to be able to do that stuff.
Very true.
So they've got limits to their liability. Like you and I can't sue them for doing that. You limited my ability to communicate or get information from my president, and that's not okay. But you and I can't sue them, and the ability to take any kind of action against them has been basically taken out of our hands and placed into the hands of the FCC or some other government agency, which is completely anti-American. There's not only is there no constitutional authority for the government to have that kind of control over stuff, but in doing that, they've empowered these corporations to basically push a control agenda. So Donald Trump gets his speech limited, even as he is the president of the United States, but only because he's not lining up with the agenda that the government has been pushing through these corporations.
So the corporations are leaning to the left.
Oh yeah, very much so.
So my guess would be
especially when you look at it from the perspective of zero government and authoritarian, 100% government.
Right.
Right. You can look at it and you go, okay, so which side are they on? They're definitely over here towards the authoritarian side because they are dictating to you and I what we can and can't say. Like me, I just now got another 30-day ban on Facebook, which means that in the last 4 months, I've had, or last 5 months, I've had 4 30-day bans. Little spaces in between. One of them was only 24 hours. And I haven't said anything hateful. I haven't, nothing racist, nothing hateful, nothing like that. We just simply made comments on things and given my opinion about certain stuff, and somehow that's deemed, outside of the community standards. So they dictate what it is that you and I can and can't say.
Right. And that's a problem, and that's something that no one should be okay with. And this is something that's been going on for a couple of years now, the amount of censorship and banning that's been going on all big social media platforms. And I think anyone with a logical mind, and I say that, and I don't say that in a condescending way to say that, the left people want that, because I think here recently people on the left have been facing that type of censorship. May it be brief and may it be only a few people. It's not on the scale that it has been for conservatives and right-wing people. But it is happening on the left finally. And, it should go both ways. It shouldn't just be one way. You have to have both ideas be able to coexist on all social media platforms, and none of them should be banned for hate speech or anything like that. We're all adults here, right? They have kids' YouTube. They're making a kids' Instagram. They're going to eventually make a kid's Facebook. Okay, so we have all of this kid stuff. That's for the kids. Let's leave everything else up to the adults and let us enjoy our content the way that it should be. It is so hard for me to watch YouTube right now because my recommended is trash. It is absolute trash from what it was 4 or 5 years ago. It is sad. And it's hard that this is the biggest platform and I'll always be on it. Until I have to go to do something else, but it's frustrating. Like, and no one has the amount of money to create an app like YouTube for everyone to where it's uncensored. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know, Dan. I don't know where we are when it comes to that type of thing leaving our society. I think that the left has a grip, and I think it's coming from the left, from what maybe we just established. And for our viewers out there, I do want to have someone from the left come on and maybe have this type of conversation as well to see what they think about this. But they're the ones who have made this happen.
Mm-hmm.
So what type of world would we live in if the radical left or the left get their agenda the way that they want it? What type of world would that be?
It'd be an absolute dictatorship. And the thing that you know, the thing that escapes the understanding of most people who consider themselves to be leftists, who are pushing for communism and socialism, and not realizing that communism and socialism or Nazism and fascism, they're all the same thing. They don't realize that. They've never paid attention to history. And so people who are in the middle and to the right, people who are what you would call conservative, okay, people like that get censored, they get marginalized and everything, and they get mildly persecuted. But the people who are the radical leftists, who are doing all the burning and the rioting and everything like that, they get killed. Whenever this is what history shows us, is that in every single one of these revolutions, once the point is accomplished, those people are the first ones that get taken out. And that's the leftist agenda. The first thing that they do is, once they've established control, they have to crush the very people who got them that control, because the tools they use are the pushing of anarchy, riots, violence, all of the stuff that calls for control. It says everything is crazy. We need somebody to step in and control it. One of the books, I think we've mentioned before about Jordan Peterson, right? One of the Jordan Peterson, I love listening to stuff, and he talks about in a lot of his lectures about this book called The Gulag Archipelago. And this is a book that Alexander Solzhenitsyn, I didn't say his name right, but I can't say Russian, but
close enough.
Solzhenitsyn wrote this book about his experiences within the Gulag system in Soviet Russia. And there's a preface to it. There's a beginning part of it that starts out when he was in the army, and he talks about Lenin. Now, we never talk really about Lenin. We always talk about Stalin, the big bad Stalin guy, right? Who killed 20 million of his own people. Well, and bad guy Hitler, who killed 6 million Jews, right? But he killed 10 million people total. Well, what about Lenin? Lenin's the guy who came in and did this whole revolution, right? He's the one who led the whole thing. He killed 15 million people. Right after the revolution, he swept in, and some of the first people that he killed were the people who were in the revolution with him. And once he got control, he wiped them out. And this is the part of history that these people who are pushing this stuff, who want to say that they're so different, and this is the agenda, but they don't know their own history, and they don't know what it is that they're getting themselves into. And the clamps are going to come down, because here's the difference. Most of those people are so indoctrinated, and they're so ideologically possessed that they have no real marketable talents, and they have no real ability to think for themselves. So in the wider society, they're basically useless, right? People like you and me have to be preserved. People like you and me have to be kept around, because we have talents, we have abilities, and we're able to think. So if you put us into a situation where there's a problem that needs to be solved, we can do that, right?
Yeah.
But these radical leftists, they can't. Now, they'll tell you that they can, but get into a conversation with them, and you will hear that all they do is regurgitate the same nonsense over and over again. Right?
You're referring to like the same nonsense that's on mainstream media and stuff like that. Their talking points, their that type of stuff.
Like, the constant push for equality, 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 equality. Look how it goes across the board. Sexual, equality between the sexes, equality between the races, equality between, the economic classes, which we don't have classes in the United States. That's an arbitrary thing that's been forced on us, but it's complete bullshit.
When it comes to equality, though, and this is what fascinates me, just now that you bring that up, and specifically talking about the working class and that type of environment, because we all know what the backbone of America is, and that's the working middle class. That's what represents majority. I mean, obviously, that's the biggest part of America, and the middle class and the poor people, and the very rich are a very small percentage. And when it comes to equality, and you're talking about jobs where I don't know what the percentage of people who make less than $100,000 is in the United States when it comes to workers, but I would venture out to say it's over 50% of people, if not more, in the United States probably make under $100,000. I don't think, and again, this is just my opinion in the type of environment of work that I've worked, and I've worked in a lot of different places, that especially when it comes to race or equality with women, and you know what I'm saying, that I've ever seen it exist. And I'm not saying that it doesn't. I'm not saying that at all. Of course it exists. But in my lifetime, in 32 years living on this earth, especially the past 10 years, women have had every same opportunity that I've had. I've had more women bosses than I've had men bosses. Mm-hmm. By far, man, by far in the restaurant industry, you see a lot more women in the restaurant business as managers than you do see men, at least from what I've seen. And you see women in higher powers, district managers, regional managers. Hands down, I've seen way more women than I have men. That's just my experience. You know what I'm saying? And same when it comes to color. I've seen a lot of people of color hold big powers of position in the restaurant business, man. So if that's one of the talking points of the left, I'm sure that they have their own instances. But to say that it's, again, what we went back to earlier is that everyone in America has an opportunity, especially for people who want to make, or people who make $100,000 or less. That opportunity is there for the taking. It's not hard, no matter who you are or what you are, as long as you are not a criminal. You know what I'm saying? To go out and make $100K in a year. Honestly, if you want it, you can go get it, no matter who you are.
Right, and that's the thing that the government has worked really hard to limit. That's one of the things. That's one of the problems that we have with government, is that they want to limit access to opportunity and dole it out as they see fit.
That's
right?
a problem.
So
that's a problem.
It is.
That's
it's
a
huge
problem.
Especially because the people who are pushing that equality agenda, they never recognize the progress that is made. The progress that's made is never enough. Because conservative people are always blamed or are always made fun of for, opining for the good old days and the way things used to be, right? Well, the leftists are always pointing to the bad old days, how we need to fix all this stuff because it's always been bad, right? We need to fix all these things. It's like, no, it hasn't always been bad. As a matter of fact, some of the problems that if you want to say that I'm glorifying the old days and saying it was better than it was, the leftists are constantly looking at the old days and saying it was a whole lot worse than it was. The problems were bigger and more widespread than they actually were. Like reparations. We can use that because that is one that really highlights that whole thing. The leftists want to start talking about reparations for slavery, but you and I are the ones who are supposed to pay it. Right? I don't know that any of my ancestors ever owned slaves. And I know for a fact that most of my ancestors, or a good many of my ancestors, refused to fight in the Civil War. So they weren't even involved in it. I do have relatives who did fight in the Civil War on the side of the South, but a lot of my relatives are from up in the mountains. And they were just like, yeah, we're not getting involved in that. We don't care. So where do they fit into that, right? They were in the South, didn't own slaves, and refused to fight.
I don't know that they'd have an answer for you.
Hey,
and I'm scared, and I would love to hear their answer to a question like that. Because where's the equality in that? And I think that's what you're asking, and it's not there, and it's just a double standard in my opinion. And the question is, I think the bigger it's what is the bigger picture, right? And maybe what is their end goal? And I know you kind of already talked about total dictatorship basically, or socialism, or total government. But let's think future. Let's think 100 years from now. Let's say the radical left get what they want, and let's say they hold power for 100 years. You're saying right now that it would be a Hitler-esque or something like some type of environment like that if they were to have their way.
Yep, Hitler-esque, Stalin-esque, Mao-esque. I think Mao would be a better example to use because the Iron Curtain that existed in Eastern Europe was not completely effective, but it was fairly effective at keeping information away from us about what was going on over there in Eastern Europe and Russia when the Soviet Union was around, right? And as far as Hitler and Germany is concerned, a lot of the information about what actually was going on there, we've got some highlights and stuff, but a lot of the information has been destroyed for the bombing and the war and everything. But with China and Mao, we've got some pretty good information that came out because of so many people who were able to escape and report on what was going on. With his cultural revolution and their one-child policy and all these other things. This is an authoritarian government that made decisions for the entire country based on the opinions of a small group of very ideologically possessed, ignorant, and intellectually challenged individuals. Basically, these were people who understood force. Mao was talking about, that he was going to do everything he needed to do at the barrel of a gun. He understood force. Outside of that, he didn't really understand much of anything. So he would come to decisions, and then he would push that. I mean, he had purges. We heard briefly about different purges that would happen in the Soviet Union when I was a kid. And, you'd hear about it, but you never hear any details. But we'd get details about stuff that happened in China where there would be these massive purges where someone would question Mao. They'd say, hey, this might not be a good idea. And it wouldn't even be a situation where they would be opposing him. They'd just be simply trying to advise him. And the next thing you know, they've got a whole brand new bunch of advisors. It's like, where'd all those guys go? He killed millions of people, and that's what these authoritarians, that's what these leftists never seem to grasp, is that the utopia that they seek to create, that they've been promised through these idiotic ideologies like Marxism, the utopia that they've been promised is not possible. It's a fantasy.
And just just like and this is all I'm going to say about this. And I completely agree with what you're saying, but to the same fact that we believe in capitalism, we believe in the Constitution, and yet, and I'm not saying that any of those things are bad. I mean, obviously, you know how I feel, Dan, about those things, but those things really those things don't exist right now, or they do, but they're slowly going away, and we're losing all our freedoms, and it may be due to what you're talking about. But this process keeps repeating itself. Like you said, history keeps repeating itself. So somewhere along the lines, and Tim Pool says this a lot, that conservatives just kind of, like you said, they just want to be left alone. They, like your family, they just kind of leave me alone. Let me do what I want to do. And in a lot of these situations, some people get away with that and they're lucky and they don't have to really deal with the type of environment that you're talking about. But anyways, what I'm saying is the conservatives just kind of lay down and they let it happen, or the Republicans, or the right, or the far right. And if history repeats itself and it continues to do that, then the far left always, for some reason, is able to gain this dictatorship control and do these types of things, which is egregious to society and the civilization, into the world of planet Earth. And how does that continue to happen? So these far leftists are narcissistic to an extreme level, to where I guess you would say the most prominent people who create these types of things are extremely smart to the point where they're able to make this happen. And they're able to make majority of these leftist people, or far leftist or radical left, believe in the type of thing that they want them to believe in, and create this history that keeps repeating itself. We can't allow history to repeat itself, man. Like, we got to move on. We got to start doing bigger and better things.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm saying, I'm sorry, is that I know you just heard me. I'm sorry, but what I'm saying is that they are very smart in a narcissistic way, and people on the right or people in the middle or people who are libertarians just allow them to do it. That's the craziest part. Continuously throughout history, allow it. And I know that people have fought to the death. You know, I'm not saying they just bend over, but for the most part, well, no, for the whole part, history just keeps repeating itself. So,
and it's the reason that that this, when we start talking about leftist ideology and leftists in general, your run-of-the-mill racist is pretty solidly below average intelligence. They think they're a lot smarter than they are, and the reason for that is that the people who are the people who are the dictators, the people who are wanting to run the show, are smart, and they do understand history, and they do understand human psychology, and they do understand the tools that have worked for thousands of years to manipulate populations to fall under this authoritarian control. So they understand what it is that they need to do. But part of that manipulation is getting people who are of limited intellect and who are basically they're ignorant and lazy. And so these authoritarian leftists, the smart ones, understand that if you can manipulate these people, especially through emotional ideas, but you manipulate them through these emotional ideas and this absolute unachievable goal of utopia, right? Listen, this is what we're all working for. Everything will be good if you can just get these evil white guys to behave. Everything will be good when women make $1 for every dollar that a man makes, you know. Everything will be good as soon as cops stop shooting black people, right? All of these different things. And when you dig into any one of those items, the facts don't bear that out. The facts don't support the agenda that they're talking about. But the people buy into these emotional points, right? I mean, if you ever talk to somebody who claims to be a Black Lives Matter supporter about black on black crime and statistics of police shootings and things like that, they will absolutely refuse to get into a legitimate conversation with those facts, right?
Yeah.
You're racist for bringing that up. I'm a racist for bringing that up. We can't have an actual discussion about it because they are so attached to this idea that there is this utopia we can get to if these facts are dismissed and pushed to the side. You know, so they're not into thinking, they're not into reasoning, they're not into logic, they're not into facts. What they're into is what their ideology, what they've been fed by these people at the top, these authoritarians at the top, who are feeding them exactly what it is they need to do. People like Bill Gates. Bill Gates is an absolute. He is a.
Man, he thinks he's God, is what he thinks.
Mm-hmm.
If he's just a front, and again, after having David Icke on, and maybe Bill Gates is a big player in this earth that we live on. I think that he might be. I don't know if you had to put a percent on how big of a player he is on the poker table when it comes to controlling the earth. I don't know what that would be, but This dude's, I mean, there's reports coming out legitimate this year he's going to block the sun out with chalk dust. That's allegedly it's non-lethal to human beings to combat global warming. He wants to block the sun, man. Like, that's insane.
Bill Gates really and truly is an idiot. He is a low IQ idiot. He has never invented anything. He doesn't know anything about software. He doesn't know anything about how to run a company. Basically, he's used his family money. He used his family money to buy an operating system and sell IBM on the idea that they should use his operating system. Then he stole a graphical user interface from Steve Jobs and used it to make Windows, right? His software was so crappy, and his intelligence level and understanding of operating systems and software was so horrendous that Windows 95 basically went through a whole bunch of face changes until 2000, about 2010. So 15 years before they actually were able to write a brand new operating system. And in the meantime, all he did was he never invented anything. All he did was go around and buy up companies using the leverage he was able to accumulate from becoming partnered up with IBM to put his software on their personal computers.
Not only that, what was it? His buddy Paul Allen, was that his name?
I think so, yeah.
His partner that he basically just gypped while he was in the hospital, wasn't going to give him any steak or anything like that, man. I don't know, man. It scares me that, to those type of people is what scares me, that people are allowed. And I know with true capitalism, and I know we're kind of just veering off here a little bit on what we were talking about, and that's fine, man. That's Talk Junkies. That's what we're all about. I don't know. It's just scary, man. Just that people. Sorry, this is what I was going to say. And I know you've listened to me, Johnny, and Jesse, and I think that us three are all in agreement that capitalism works and true capitalism works, and that's fine. But what that allows is people to have an unlimited amount of money, a few individuals, right, or a free market. That allows people to have billions and billions of hundreds of billions of dollars. What are the consequences of something like that? And let's say that that's what we're led to believe is that's capitalism or free market. Those are huge implications for people to have that much money, like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or Bill Gates or you name it, the top 50 Forbes magazine billionaires. The type of influence that those people have, no matter what type of society that you live in, will always be greedy and always have their own agenda because ego is something that is always inherently in humans.
And here's the thing, is that's not capitalism. All those guys have the power that they have because of government control and influence. They don't have it because of capitalism. Because capitalism is you and I producing whatever it is that we want, or whatever it is that we're able to produce, and then selling it as we see fit. Now, if I choose to hire people to do that, and again, as soon as you start talking about hiring people, the government has gotten involved in that.
Right.
By instituting a minimum wage and all these other laws that come into place, that puts a crimp in what you and I can do as far as hiring people, what I can do as far as marketing myself, to sell my hours of labor. But think about Jeff Bezos with his Amazon company and no real way to leverage what it is that he wants to do. Without government support, without the ability to get contracts with the government and do all this stuff, Jeff Bezos doing that by himself is suddenly thrown into a highly competitive market where you and I can see what he's doing and come up with our own version of that. Don't be fooled for a second that Jeff Bezos did any of this on his own. He's had a huge amount of support from China, from the Chinese government.
For sure, and I'm in agreement upon all that, but it doesn't change the fact that he still is the richest man with over $120 billion in his pocket, or his net value. What in a 90-year lifespan could you do with $120 billion? You know what I'm saying? Like, and I agree with capitalism and how you describe it. I'm 100% on board with that. But again, you come back to the fundamentals and what's inherent in humans is greed and ego.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you have a population of 7 billion people on an earth, it's inevitable that you're going to have billionaires unless there was some type of limitation, which, again, I don't believe in that. So I guess what I'm saying is there's not a right answer.
Well, I think there is, because...
But $100 billion, Dan, we could not have $100 billion, man. Like, you would be a completely different person with $100 billion, whether you like it or not, or whether I like it or not.
Oh, I would, for sure.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying there?
But the thing is that the accumulation of that money is artificial. The accumulation of that money has been because of the ability of individuals to align themselves with the government. Jeff Bezos would be a basement dweller with a single PC selling stuff, through his one little website, if he didn't have connections to the government, if he hadn't gotten hooked up with China and their government. And that's the thing that we really got to understand with this is that capitalism is about the individual. When you start having all these corporations and all these people who are super wealthy, that's not capitalism, because these guys, everything that they're doing is based on this entire network of people that they've been able to employ, and not necessarily employ in a manner where it's a willing thing, but employ them in a manner because they've been able to shut down all the other outlets that these people have, right?
Mm-hmm.
You and I don't have jobs because we want jobs, right? You and I have jobs because when we go out there and we look at the opportunities that are available to us, it's a whole lot easier to go and get a job than to jump through all the hurdles that we would need to jump through to start the business that we would like to start.
Right.
To be able to sell our services and our products that we want to sell, because there's just too many hurdles.
I see what you're saying. And there's a lot of, okay, so we're both in agreement about the federal government and government in general. And you're a really big proponent of saying that if the Constitution were fully in act or fully in place, that most of our problems would go away almost simultaneously or within a few years. Who knows what type of... You said just quickly, sorry. You said all of our problems would go away pretty quick. So what you're suggesting is that what we're discussing right now, that's one of those problems that would be fixed, because we never truly have had true capitalism in the United States, because even when the U.S. Constitution was signed, it was under siege probably within the first 10 years, or you know what I'm saying? Like, we've only been out of debt, once in like the 1850s with Andrew Jackson. That was the only time we were out of debt in our country's history. Like, that's crazy. So we don't really even know what true capitalism is without the government involved.
And if we talk about, there's this period of time in the mid to late 1800s where, you have all of these people that they called the robber barons, these guys who became magnificently wealthy: Carnegie, Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, people whose names we still talk about today. They're over 100 years later. We're still talking about these guys, right? Because they were so magnificently wealthy. They make the amount of wealth that these guys have makes Jeff Bezos look like he's pinching pennies. I mean, he's just nothing.
Right.
But the only reason that those guys got the power and money that they got was government. They had not only did they have local and state and federal government support, but they also had people from outside the United States who bought into their system, who bought into them and owned them and got them and allowed them to be able to go in and expand what they were doing, to buy all the steel mills, to buy all of the different small oil companies around. I mean, there were hundreds of small people who had oil wells on their land, and they could produce whatever kind of products that they wanted, petroleum products that they wanted. And he came in, and Rockefeller came in and started buying all those guys up. The people who own the big automobile companies, prior to World War II, there were more than 150 automobile manufacturers in the United States. And because of the way that the government got involved in all of that, by 1980, we had 3.
So as people can see from what you're describing is the more you get government involved over a long period of time, things become centralized and turn into corporations and turns into just probably the 1% making this an enormous amount of money that we're always all arguing about and fighting about. Mm-hmm. They're the ones, and like you said, like jumping through hurdles to be a farmer now would be tough. I mean, because 30, 40 years ago, there were millions of farmers, and that's dwindled into the hundreds of thousands because the government is now heavily involved in agriculture. You know what I'm saying? And maybe is that due to
are too. Huh? These corporations have gotten into farming. They come in and they buy up huge amounts of farmland, and they begin farming all of that, and these farmers become employees. One of the reasons that ends up happening is because of all the regulations. These corporations can afford to spend the money. They can go out and make the loans and spend the money and take that risk to be able to meet all of these government guidelines.
For sure.
And to hire the lawyers to translate all that stuff for them.
And we always talk about like just the issue, right, or the problem, or why we're mad. But to me, what this is like, what the light bulb above my head is saying is, anyone who's listening, like just think about an environment, or think about a world that without the government involved. Think about the world in the Constitution, like you suggest, how free we would be. Think about how easy it would be to go open up a business, just to maybe just get your state involved, or your local, not even your state, but your local city. And you know, there's thousands of oil refineries in people's back, like you said, or thousands of farmers, and like just people doing what they want to do, and the government not getting involved. And I know this isn't. I think I could have said it better. But what I'm trying to say is the amount of jobs that have been lost and the amount of opportunity that has been lost for people is substantial. It's very large. And again, everything's being centralized. And what I'm trying to say, is that think of the opportunity you would have if the government wasn't involved. The amount of opportunity would be massive. Mm-hmm. Your dreams would be easier to achieve, and the Constitution would work the way it's supposed to, which is following your dreams and being able to do it, working hard, you know what I'm saying? But now you have to work extremely hard till you die. Like if you want to be a surgeon, man, like the average lifespan of like an ER surgeon, or like a critical unit, or you know what I'm saying, ICU, 54 years old is when they die. That's how hard you have to work, man. Like you go to school for 10 to 12, and that's due to the society that we live in, the things that we're talking about, the amount of stress that this puts on people's heads.
Right.
What it does to your families.
And the government regulation that's involved with that. When you start talking about the medical industry, you know, because you brought this up about the doctors having a huge amount of stress, not just because of having to look at me and you and figure out what's wrong with us. A lot of doctors take that personally. You know, if they begin to take care of you and something happens while you're under their care, and you go and you begin to decline, a lot of those guys, you know, that they've got a personal stake in that. But on the flip side of that, the other part of it, the other part of the stress is the fact that the government basically comes in and for a lot of these guys tells them how much they're going to get paid. So we've got a whole lot of people. When I was a kid, there was a whole lot of doctors out there, and there was very few doctors who were actually employed by hospitals. Now it's the opposite. Now most doctors are employed by these hospital corporations. There's fewer and fewer independent practices out there, and the hospitals are trying to shut them down completely.
It's crazy, man.
Right. And so now you've got somebody who's this ER doctor, this ICU doctor, who not only has the stress of caring for patients, but also has the stress of the fact that now they've become an employee. And how much money they're going to make has nothing to do with how well they take care of you or the costs involved or anything like that. Somebody's coming in and saying, yeah, we just got this guy who's just out of medical school, and we're going to hire him instead, and we're firing you. You know, he's got no control, whereas, for hundreds of years, doctors basically had control of their livelihood, and it's gone.
Just another industry that's been centralized. I think, I mean, if anyone's who's listening to this, you can kind of see where we're going with this, you know, the farmers, the medical, the oil industry. I mean, like Dan, you mentioned off the names back in the early 1900s and mid 1850s. That's just, that process is going to continue, man. In another 100 years, there's only going to be like 10 corporations, man, and that's it. 100 years from now, if everything goes as planned, I'm sure for them, it's going to be a one world government, and there's going to be, like I said, maybe like 6 to 10 corporations. That's it. Running everything, man.
And America is the only thing that stands in the way of that.
I don't know. I don't know if we do anymore, man. I know you and I will go back and forth on this, but I think, again, we're past the point. I truly do, man. But if there was something in the way, it would be America, because you're right. There are a lot of Americans out there that would beg to differ, for sure. You're right. But not all of them. But not all of them, man. Not all of them. I would say half, if not more, are brainwashed, for sure.
And that's one of the things that I think is going to really be the future of America is separating people who are Americans from everyone else, and telling everyone else that they just got to go. You can't stay here, because America is the Constitution. You're either on board with that or you're not. And if you're not on board with that, we don't need you here.
Right.
I mean, we just don't.
Very true.
Right? You know, and we get rid of all those people, especially the commies, the socialists, the Nazis and the fascists, the white supremacists. We get rid of all those people, get them out of here, and we've got a core of people who believe in a fundamental core of principles that we can all live by. And that's the real thing that I think is so important about the Constitution, is when you think about that, it's not this ephemeral, you know, it's not this ideology that, you know, is just sort of there in the ether. It's a contract that's written down on paper. You and I can pull that paper out and read it over and say, this is allowed and this isn't. This is the law and this isn't. You know, Mr. President, you can do that, but you can't do this. There's no other place on the face of the planet that has that. Everywhere else, the government is the source of its own authority.
And I think anyone who was to pick up the Constitution and read it would be like, wow, this is pretty cool. I like this. You know, it makes sense.
It does. You know, especially when you take it and you read it not as the, you know, Congress and past presidents and the Supreme Court read it.
Individuals
here and there. But when you read it basically as a blueprint or as an instruction manual, then it all of a sudden makes a whole lot more sense. You begin to see pieces of it and you go, okay, now I see that, you know, I can't just read the Second Amendment by itself, right? The Second Amendment is there because there's a piece in Article 1 that talks specifically about the militia.
Yeah.
Wait, so it's not just an arbitrary thing. You know, it's not just sitting over here by itself. It's all of these pieces that are connected together to make this one thing, this one machine, this one contract between us to determine how we're going to run things.
You know what it is?
The government has to abide by.
What the Constitution is Neo from the Matrix.
Yeah.
That's what the Constitution is, man. Mm-hmm. That's what breaks us free. That's honestly, I mean, maybe I'm saying it's a Hail Mary, but no, it's not. I mean, the Constitution is the best way to have a massive amount of population be able to live cordially with each other and freely. Whether, you know, it's common sense. It's you and I or anyone else being able to do whatever they want to do without anybody questioning them at any specific time in their life of the lifespan of 79 years that we're given on this earth. You know, that's it.
And that's what the Constitution is. You were talking earlier about greed and ego. The Constitution sets up a situation in which greed and ego are easily checked, right? and capitalism does a great job with that too, because if you want to be greedy and do that in a manner that is selfish or that's harmful to other people, the Constitution gives us plenty of tools to shut that down. Capitalism gives us plenty of tools to shut down situations where people are using unfair or even criminal tactics to accumulate more wealth, like what Bill Gates has done. Because restrictions have been placed, because illegal restrictions have been put in place, he's been above the law. He's been out of touch because he's been protected by people within the government. Whereas, any one of us could have or should have already sued him for things that he's done.
It makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm all about it, man. We're a little bit over the top of the hour here, Dan, right over like an hour and 4 minutes. So we'll probably want to leave it there, man. Time flies by when you and I are talking, my man.
It sure does, man.
Yeah. We hit a lot of good things, man. I think at the very beginning, we hit it hard, and then we kind of veered off for maybe 5, maybe 8 minutes. And then we just went right back into it, and we hit it hard, man. We really did. We had really good conversation. For some reason, I cannot talk tonight. So that's the only downside to tonight's podcast. But
that's definitely a downside for you because if you can't talk, that sort of leaves you at my mercy because I'll just go.
Yeah. That's very true. I don't know what it is tonight, man. We had some friends over, and the girls were playing. It was loud, a lot of kids running around, and I don't know, it was hectic. But I always appreciate you coming on, my man. Always wish the best for you. I always appreciate you coming on the show. Look forward to having you and Pat from Truth, Money, Freedom come on the show as well and have a conversation, because to have you two have some type of conversation, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be one for the ages, my man. And we're also going to try and get a local sheriff here in Missouri on the show too, for anyone listening at the end of the hour. And we're going to talk about the Missouri Conservation Act. I'm going to work very hard for that to make that happen. But Dan, you got any lasting thoughts, my man?
Not that I could come up with right now. I think we covered it pretty well this time.
Okay. Well, I'll end the podcast here real quick, but thanks for joining, man. Well, again, it's always a pleasure. Have a good night, and we'll chat with you real soon.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Paul. Have a good night.
You too, sir. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Dan, I would say from the Constitution of Us, but he just continues to get kicked off of his Facebook page. So we'll still shout it out there, man. We'll still put it in the links below, because I'm sure maybe something still be posted on there, but I don't know. I'll check it out. But I hope you guys like that podcast. I know it seemed like maybe it was just a little bit of maybe people on the right or people conservative, stuff like that. But you know what? I'm going to get someone on the left, and we're going to have a conversation, because there's a lot of questions tonight that I have for anyone who's a radical left or anyone who believes in corporatization and stuff like that to come on the show and answer some big questions, some very big questions. But me and Jess will be back at it next week. Thanks for tuning in. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. And to all our junkies out there, stay fly and ring the bell.